want to get on with something about why QE is never going to end and where they're actually benefiting from QE big time. None of that money is actually getting into the middle class economy to stimulate trade and commerce and shore up the economy. It isn't. That's not happening unless maybe certain people who know Obama personally or somebody in the administration personally or something. I don't know. Maybe it works like that, but the money actually QE. They're going to continue on with it forever till everything blows up. Basically, how this is working is like this. There's what they do is they're buying troubled assets from banks that have troubled assets on their balance sheets. So what's a troubled asset? Basically, the bank makes a loan to either like a business or an individual for so many dollars. Whatever the heck it is, 80% loan to value ratio, whatever, and they can't pay it back. Say the business goes under, there's production, sales slow down, whatever, they can't pay it back. Or such and such family gets under, they can't pay the mortgage, right? So then it becomes a troubled asset. The asset itself is still fine. I mean, it's brand new house, brand new building, or whatever it is, still fine, but it's no longer a source of revenue for the bank. So the Federal Reserve buys that. I'm being simplistic about it, but I just want to say this for a reason. I want to point something out. Why they're never going to want to end QE, though. That's what I'm really pointing out. Why they will not want to end QE. It's a great game for the guys on the top. So the Federal Reserve buys up the troubled asset. And actually, they buy it up with Treasury notes. Treasury notes are basically produced out of thin air. One reason everybody's getting into the silver and gold because it's backed by something that's substantial. You can, it's there. Basically Treasury notes are basically computer-generated money. So that's what they buy the troubled asset with. And it's a troubled asset because the people that got the loan couldn't pay it, so it was no longer an economic something producing money for a revenue stream for the bank. So the Federal Reserve said, okay, we'll take it. Who's the Federal Reserve? It's basically it's a cartel of the largest banks in the United States, including like J.P. Morgan, and there's shareholders that own those into those banking establishments, and they're the ultra wealthy in the United States. So basically, the ultra wealthy, if you just follow the little simple dots, the ultra wealthy are buying up or getting title to assets for pennies on a dollar because people got upside down, and it's not costing them anything because basically the money is created out of thin air to buy those assets. So they want to keep this going forever. As a matter of fact, I saw recently in the last week or two, articles about some criticism of the Obama administration because they are been accused of kind of trying to reinflate this real estate bubble again, just like they did with Obama didn't do it, it was under George Bush, but just like it was done back during 2005, 6, and 7, and 2003 and 4, by making loans easy for people to get. People who are not qualified, they're actually making it easy for them to get the money to buy houses and stuff. So basically, maybe they'll try to work really hard and put maybe all their money into it for a couple of years, and they'll lose it. And then the Federal Reserve could buy it up for basically nothing. That's what's going on. So they're actually repeating the game again. In other words, hey, let's make the money available to people so they can buy houses. This will stimulate the economy. Because actually the economy is, that's the reason it'll give. Because actually the economy is, over 50% of the economy is actually in the real estate and construction area. Actually, construction and real estate, when you look at all the ancillary industries out there that support it, it's over 50% of the U.S. economy. So when you shore that up, it helps make a boom. But what they're really doing is they've been trying to give it loans to people who are not qualified, which gives you a little bit of temporary stimulation to the economy, but it's a great shrewd game in the long run because these people will not be able to afford to make the payments, and then the Federal Reserve will buy up troubled assets again. There are new troubled assets on these bank balance sheets, so they want to keep feeding these banks more troubled assets. You know, they want the industry. In other words, it's actually all going into the few people on the top. That's actually what Lindsey Williams said, but I don't think he explained actually how it's working. But it's quite obvious to me why they would want to keep that game going, because it doesn't cost them anything. Now, I know the metals got slammed down on Friday, and I want to point out something else about, actually, metals got slammed down in Japanese yen. But, you know, no matter what currency it was, all the metals got slammed down. But actually, in Japanese yen, gold has been making a good bull run up until Friday. But it's, you know, if you're looking at a chart and you were Japanese and you were looking at a chart of gold in yen, you would be thinking temporary setback. You wouldn't be thinking the way it, like you would be thinking in the U.S. dollar. Actually, yen actually at this level, it looks like it was around February 2012. It was this high. It was this high. And in other words, we're looking at a low, like in basically. We're looking at, in other words, when it pulled back to 1500, or actually it's the lowest it's been in, I guess, a couple of years, right? But, you know, we're looking back like at the same time period, like in February of 2012, gold was actually running up to like 17 something at that time period. And in Japanese yen, it's actually only pulled back to what it ran up to during that time period, because the yen has been depreciating lately. So it's almost like if you're Japanese and you looked at this pullback, I don't think that would really dissuade you from buying gold, especially with the news that the Bank of Japan is doing this ridiculous amount of 1.5 trillion yen quantitative easing. So, you know, it's like a global market, and actually what happens to the commodities and silver and gold in U.S. dollars is not actually the same picture you're looking at when you're looking at what's happening in yen. And I think the Japanese are probably more positioned probably to buy more gold, because the average Japanese is a saver and the average American is a spender. So if there's could be any influence on, you know, a lot of people ignore the Japanese sometimes. I mean, they're always looking at China, the big one. But the Japanese are a very major part of the market too in gold. This could actually cause, you know, this pullback, because if you're looking at this chart, I'm not showing it to people right now, but if you're looking at this chart, there's like it reached this point where gold was this high twice, had a pullback, and this I'm talking about from like in 2011. Basically, when we had the height in 2011 in gold here, it pulled back just like it did in Japanese yen. It reached that same height in Japanese yen in February of 2012, pulled back some, and then went right through it. So in yen, gold is the highest it's ever been. And Friday, it had a pullback, and actually where it touched the point where it pulled back to was the peak at the end of February 2012, and a peak that was in around very beginning of September, very end of August in 2011. So actually, if you're a buyer in Japanese yen, you'd be looking at this, wow, that's a buying opportunity per charts. But in dollars, you'd be like, you're not sure. So I had to point that out. I'm not showing a chart, but if you ever look at the Japanese yen chart, you can see what's going on. It's interesting. It's a very different picture than when you look at it in the U.S. dollar. Now, the other thing is, I want to point out about the U.S. dollar index. The U.S. dollar index actually increased a lot. The one time that's been really high recently, in the last recent years, was in June of 2010. It was around 88, 89. I think that's where it hit the height. Actually, it was like per internet rumor, but probably a good internet rumor. It was like George Soros with some other hedge funds orchestrated an attack on the euro to prop up the U.S. dollar for some of their, I don't know exactly how he made money on that, obviously. But the attack started in late 2009, around November, December, and then the dollar started moving up against because the euro was getting slammed, and it actually peaked out in June of 2010. At that time, the dollar was 88, 89, and the euro was like 121. So, but you know, if you were looking at that during that time period, the dollar's going up, the dollar's going up. Oh, you'd be like, oh, the safety is the dollar. The dollar's going to go into the 90s. And guess what happened? Once it hit that peak, it dropped, and then nothing was really going on with the metals, like in June of 2010 or July of 2010. Then late August 2010, things started changing around as the dollar was dropping. And you know, the dismal miners at that time, like, as a matter of fact, if you looked at the miners in the sector of rare earth, they weren't doing nothing for a long period of time. Then all of a sudden, in the month of September 2010, they shot up 7 times, some of them. 7 times. Weren't doing nothing. Bored to death. So, I'm just saying, I don't have a crystal ball, but this is typically how things work. That's why you don't put all your cash into something, because you want to be able to wait it out. You know, that's the other thing. But just looking back, you know, we had one fake out here with the dollar. Basically, and this is where I thought silver was going to get to the low, basically in the summer of 2012, like July, August. I think I said April last video, but I meant to say August. The summer of 2012. I thought it was going to break a little bit below that 26. That's the classic thought. And it didn't. And then they announced QE3. And then it moved up. Everything moved up. What I think's going on, guys on the top, they're playing games. They're faking people out, man. I swear. I mean, it's almost like I'm getting paranoid here. But, you know, I think they are. Because, you know, one reason I'm picking up on is Ben Bernanke's remarks, I think it was in December of 2012, he stated, like, and also how the major media pushed it too, which tells you something. He stated something like, oh, we're thinking about ending QE. If we get unemployment below 6.5% and inflation below 2%. But remember, what I just said before, why they would never want to end QE, because it's a great racket, is because they're getting real assets for paper. Because these troubled assets are on the bank's balance sheets are real bricks and mortar. And they're getting that for paper. They want to keep lending people more money to put them under maybe a couple years from now so they can buy even more troubled assets. So they're not going to end QE. So when he came out with this statement about, well, if it gets below 6.5% unemployment and all this kind of stuff and below 2% inflation, they're going to end QE. They're not going to end QE. They don't want to end QE. But you see, that statement made a major hit on the metals at that time. And people like the commentators and stuff on the internet, and they're saying, well, it was also how the major media made a big thing about what he said and how he said it and stuff. Hey, you know, I think that was all deliberate. See, that's how I think they're trying to psych you out with these metals. And you got to remember, one major fact, and actually I was watching Jim Comiskey Metals, but hey man, this is like one big fact you got to put out there. He said it, but since central banks are buying more gold, the most gold they ever bought since 1964. So in 50 years, this is the most gold they bought. Now, the other thing is, that's probably not all the numbers, because from what I read, there's a lot of like Chinese buying, Indian buying, and Russian buying off the market. Actually, they're trying to buy the gold direct from the mines in like Africa without it hitting any kind of open market, so it affects the price. They're making like under the table cash deals directly with the mines in Africa. That makes sense. I mean, really, wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you try to get it as cheap as possible? I mean, say, for instance, you were just going to buy some silver coins. Wouldn't you like to say, hey, I ain't going to go to a bullion dealer. I'm going to go right to the mine here and see if I can get it a few percent cheaper. But basically, they're doing it because they're doing it that way because they buy so much, it would actually affect the spot price. You know, as an individual, it wouldn't do that. But when a country says, "Hey, give me 100 tons of gold," yeah, it's going to affect something. So, just want to point these common sense things out because I don't think people have explained it exactly right. Basically, the game is they're trying to get hard assets for paper, and they're going to keep this game going as long as possible. That's something Lindsey Williams said, but hey, I don't really need him to tell me that because I could see why they're doing it. And tell you the truth, most of the dorks in the financial world, they don't even see that because they're too busy. They're like, tunnel vision. But hey, that's a great scam. I think most of the people in the financial world would not, right now, they would tell you to avoid the metals. I think you should stick in with them because it's almost like anything. They're playing a loan shark game, and so they're doing the same thing with real estate. They're doing the same thing with everything, with the metals too. In other words, real estate's being bought up for paper. They want people upside down on loans. They want to get the stuff cheap. They want to keep lending more money to more people. And they at the same time they could say, "Oh, we're trying to stimulate the economy," but actually they're getting people upside down because people can't afford this too much house. So, that's what happens. So they get the asset itself. They get the asset for nothing. So they're going to keep that QE going. They're full of it. So when Ben Bernanke says, "Oh, yeah, we might end it," or he hints that we might end it, he only did that to knock down the metals markets. So, and if central banks are buying, that tells me something big time. They're not stupid. They'll sell it later on, maybe to the middle class, but just hopefully, I'm going to outsmart them. I mean, hopefully, I'm not on the wrong end of that deal, but I think that's how it's going to work out in the long run. So QE is never going to end till it's like forced to end. And I guess the only way it's forced to end is when the economy, the production of goods and services in the actual industrial sector, where they're buying up all these travel assets, there's nothing more to buy up, basically. The machine breaks down after a while because there's no more people to lend to. There's no more, the industry's actually slowing down. And then the whole thing will stop. But they'll be holding title to everything. And then they're going to want the force because the backlash is going to come on them. That's why you have the Department of Homeland Security. So it's quite obvious what's going on.